Well, good morning, everyone, and so great to see all your names popping into the participant list. I'm Yana Kinsmucker. I'm the Faculty Associate for Teaching and Learning, part of the new Teaching and Learning Center, which is, as you may know, the merger of the former TLAC, Teaching, Learning, and Assessment Center, and the former Office of Digital Learning and Innovation. And we are the new go-to hub for all things faculty development centered around teaching. Got a couple of colleagues from the center here joining me today. Tom, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Tom Pantasis. I'm an instructional designer with the Teaching and Learning Center, and very much looking forward to our conversation today.
Hi, everyone.
Madison. Yeah.
I'm Madison Steinbrenner. I'm also an instructional designer with the Teaching and Learning Center.
So we'll get going, and this is very conversational, discussion-oriented to emphasize that we're all figuring this out as we go, basically. We don't necessarily have a set of answers or solutions for how you should use AI tools in your classrooms or how you should talk to your students, but we have a lot of thoughts about it, and a big part of what we'll do today is thinking about how you feel about it and how you can translate into conversations in your classroom in a transparent and supportive way as we want to speak to our students, and figuring out what it means for you. I know we all teach a whole variety of different things and probably have different comfort levels and expectations about how generative AI may or may not fit with the kinds of work we do in our own disciplines. So there's not a one-size-fits-all model, and you may have seen circulating the AI Teaching with AI toolkit that the TLC, this center, distributed a couple weeks in advance of the semester. There's also another message that was sent to students. So we're all know that this is sort of the elephant in the room, and we have to figure out how to approach it. But I'm really viewing this as an important conversation that we can all learn from each other. And as we start to feel more comfortable with what generative AI is and also how to talk about it, hopefully we will adapt, just as we have adapted to calculators and adapted to, I like to use the example of Wikipedia. K through 12 students are still told all the time never to use Wikipedia, yet we know that they all use it. So how do we help them know how to use it wisely and use it in responsible ways in which they aren't plagiarizing, in which it's not the end point, but it's a starting point? I teach a class on how to edit Wikipedia, and so that's been a helpful analogy for me as I think about, like, how does this change what we do? I know it's not a perfect corollary, but something to think about. That this is not the first time a technology has disrupted what we do. I'd like to make sure that we're addressing what your thoughts are. We're just going to do this rather than getting too fancy externally. Just leave your thoughts in the chat if you'd like to share what you already know. This will also be helpful for us as we plan additional programming throughout this semester and in the coming years as well. So not always accurate, kind of confusing, a little bit scary. Has some utility for writing, copy editing. One very legitimate concern about introducing AI to students who aren't already using it. Well, I'm going to use what was basically the headline of a New York Times article from a few weeks ago, is assume that 100% of your students are using it. And I think that's probably a good assumption as we try to make decisions about what we're doing in the classroom. But as Shannon just wisely pointed out, students don't understand what it is necessarily either, or how and why not they could use it in the classroom. Okay, this is a super helpful list. So thanks a lot, and it's always nice that we can save these comments from the chat for our future programming. So along with this, the follow-up question: what do you want to know? I want to make sure that we address your needs here in this session as well. I'm really happy to see my friend and colleague Andy Fanlighetti here, who's done a lot of work, and he's in the arena of AI and learning about it and learning how we communicate about it as well. And this is super helpful that remember that it's not a search engine, even though it can do some of the things that we want a search engine to do, and also that it's not citable in the same ways that we could create some beautiful footnotes for a journal article or some other external source. And I love this, not a reliable source of information about itself. So I guess we can't ask ChatGPT to tell us all about yourself. Well, you can continue to add additional thoughts to the chat, and we will try to address as many of your concerns and questions as we can. So there's a lot of information out there about using AI in the classroom. These are just like, in my first doing just a very simple Google search about how to talk to your students about AI. Like, these are all examples of some of the texts that came up from sources ranging from New York Times in the middle to other teaching and learning centers across the country. So it's not that these are the answers, but that it's overwhelming how much is being written about it, and then how much advice there is on how to use it, what to do with it. Ban it, accept it. I'm finding it overwhelming to sort of get my grounding in what all is possible. So I'm using my own teaching philosophy basically as my sort of lodestar as I look forward. So I have to think about how I feel about new things in the classroom, new technologies in the classroom. How do I feel about talking with my students? How do I feel about being flexible, being transparent, all of these things? So as we're going to go into a little demo that Madison's going to do, showing how to use, I think you're using the Bing tool, Microsoft's tool, right? There are several. I know we're using ChatGPT often as a shorthand for generative AI, the text-based, but there's a number of tools now, and they all kind of have their own little personalities, I suppose. Are they sentient? I don't know. But we're gonna do a demo, and Madison will talk a little bit about how the thing works to get everyone sort of up to speed in that regard. So I'll let you take things over for the moment, Madison.
Thank you, Yanniken. So I was going to show everyone a little bit of ChatGPT, but unfortunately it is down this morning. There are too many people on the server, which is always the case when we want to show people ChatGPT. So we're going to be looking at Microsoft Bing's AI. You can only access this through Microsoft Edge as your browser. And it uses the large language model from ChatGPT, but it also searches the web. So you can get some sources in your writing. And as we've mentioned, and some people have brought up in the chat, the sources are not always accurate and correct. So that's something you definitely want to check if you are chatting with the AI. One nice thing about Microsoft Bing's AI is that you can choose a conversation style. So if you wanted to answer a little bit more creatively, a little bit more precise, it can do that. But we'll just stick with the, kind of in between balanced option for today. So I'm just going to take you through some prompts with the AI, just so you can see how if you're writing prompts for maybe an assignment or something in your course, you can kind of practice your prompting and see how advanced the AI is. And maybe, if you are just giving a basic prompt, you might want to try and beef that up a little bit and make it a little better for students. So just to begin with, I'm just going to ask it really quick to write a paragraph about why group work is important. And so since the Microsoft Bing AI has access to the internet and searches for sources, it will probably throw some of these in here without even asking. So we have some here, sources being checked. And like I mentioned before, you definitely want to check these out and see if they're credible, where they're coming from. So that's how fast you can get an answer for a prompt. And so just to take it another step further, we can kind of ask it to do the same thing, and it's pretty nice. You can just copy your prompt, copy and paste it down, and you can say, act like an experienced teacher, give it the same prompt, and make the writing engaging but smart. So we're giving some constraints here for the AI for how we want it to answer. So it's typing up our answer there. And you can see it's changing it up a little bit. And that one didn't provide us any academic research, but that is one thing you can type into. When you're talking to the AI, you can say, make sure to provide academic research, and it will look that up. Another thing we can ask it to do in our prompting is to make specific points. So that's one way that you can kind of play a role in what the AI generates. So I'm just going to copy and paste this here because it's a little long. But we're taking some of the things we asked it before to act like an experienced teacher, write that paragraph about why group work is important, make the writing engaging and smart. We're going to have it look up academic research, but to also make these following points. Group work allows students to support each other, and group work needs to be carefully designed. So we'll give it a couple seconds. You can see it's generating that answer. We have some sources now popping up. Okay, so you can see here one of the points we asked it to make, group work needs to be carefully designed. So it kind of is taking those points and generating the answer within there. And you can continue to improve your prompts, by asking the AI to generate a different version of what you got. Maybe you don't like this and you want a different kind of version. You can ask it to, make different points and change things up. So it's nice to just kind of explore and play around yourself, make an account with ChatGPT and go on there and check it out when it's not too busy, usually in the afternoon. It's easier to get on. Or get Microsoft Edge and come on here and kind of explore, ask it questions and see how you can prompt it and what kind of answers you can get. And as Yannick said, we are definitely not experts and we're still learning ourselves how to use it. So it's kind of all in an experimentation process right now. Yeah, Andrew raised his hand.
Is it okay for me to jump in and ask you to try something, Madison?
Yeah, go ahead.
Could you take a look at some of those sources in that
Yeah.
first response and compare the language of its output with the language in the sources? Because
Yeah.
I find Bing oftentimes will just gank its source language very directly. And that's just something to be aware of. It's like it doesn't always do that, but sometimes it will be a very close paraphrase.
Yeah, so you're right. It does look like this one.
There was a kind of quasi meme going around like 2 weeks ago where you guys probably saw this. They asked ChatGPT how many sunflowers you had to grow to make a liter of sunflower oil, right? And ChatGPT, having no sources at all, came up with some ludicrous answer like 40 million sunflowers or something, right? Like did not pass a sanity check.
Yeah.
If you gave it to Bing, I tried this. If you gave it to Bing, it came up with an answer that was at least plausible. It was like you need like I don't know, like half an acre or something. I don't remember what it was. But it was like not crazy, but it got that answer from like literally the first. Like if you had popped that into Google and just Googled it and just grabbed the exact first source, it had pulled it from that and it had copy and pasted it. And it was, it was one of the things that's a first source on Google for a weird question. It was like www.gardenawesome.com, right? And it seems like it does the same thing here. Like what the heck is these sources are, right? So that's just something to be aware of with Bing. It can search the web. It does a lot better at like not just going totally kind of batty the way that ChatGPT does, but it will grab fairly low quality sources and it will paraphrase them very closely.
Yeah.
And do I understand correctly that Bing is pulling from live internet sources and ChatGPT is from a older scrape? Is that?
I mean, the model is the same. The GPT-4 model that is powering the Bing search is the same model, but what it's basically doing is it's passing off your question to a Bing search. It runs a Bing search, it looks at the results, and then it summarizes the results for you, is my understanding of the process. So, like, the model is pulling in new information, yeah.
And that is one thing that I think would be helpful for everyone to understand. Can one of you explain what an LLM is and what that
Yeah, so it's a LLM stands for large language model, and it's basically what the AI was trained from. Do you want to throw something in, Tom?
It's like a predictive engine. It's based on its training. It's looking to basically make an educated prediction based on odds of what word or even part of a word comes next in the query, and then just keeps doing that over and over again to generate these responses that sound fairly decent. So things that have structures to them, like for example, a cover letter, there's typically a structure to a cover letter. They tend to do better with those structured pieces because they have a lot to pull from. It's things that don't necessarily follow a structure where it can get a little more lost. And I will, if Andy wants to jump in here with any other clarification too, I know he spent a lot of time in this space.
LLMs are like, let me drop in the chat my favorite source for understanding that, right? Large language models explained with a minimum of math and jargon. I think that's like the best source I've seen. It was really illuminating for me. Yeah, it's true that they're figuring out how to do next word prediction. The method that they use for that is really interesting in that it learns not just word frequencies, but it learns relationships between words in a mathematical way. So you're absolutely right. The more it sees of a particular structure, the more it can replicate that structure. Its ability to, like, what's actually kind of more impressive about what an LLM can do than the language it generates, that I think gets lost sometimes, is its ability to parse and understand language, right? Like, it's very easy to crap all over Bing's results when Madison typed in those questions, but just the fact that it understood her questions, like, it's a little bit like when you train the pigeon to play chess and you're still beating it 2 times out of 3 and you're like, it's not that good, right? Like, the fact that it can figure out the questions is pretty impressive.
Any questions from participants about the actual how this works part? So we're going to be starting to move into more of the like, okay, this is what we have. How do we introduce this into our or how will we confront it in our classrooms? Any questions?
Yeah, I noticed that it's got like in Facebook, the like or don't like. I assume it uses that to like modify its answers and learn from. Do you get a sense it learns from you individually and your preferences, or what it's doing when it revises based on that?
I assume it's probably taking it. Yeah, Tom said depends on the tool. Yeah, and I assume like if you're signed into Chat GPT, it has your information and then it remembers you when you come back and stuff. For the Bing AI, like I know it's kind of weird to get in. So I was using like a guest account, so it's not going to really remember me when I come back and what I said. But yeah.
Yeah, my understanding, at least with ChatGPT, I haven't used the Bing as much, is it tracks what happens within a single chat, and they then take all that stuff and they feed it back into their like learning procedures en masse. So it's kind of like figuring that out on the large scale. But if you start a new chat, it doesn't remember what happened in the last chat, right? That's one of the reasons why you can't like ask it if it wrote a student's paper. It doesn't know. It doesn't remember, right? So yeah, I don't know how much Bing tracks. Like, do they have some kind of thing where they're tracking like a particular user? I don't know. These things have what's called a context window, where they're able to remember and track a certain amount of text in a kind of short-term memory. And if you go beyond that, my understanding is they can't kind of remember what happened. So there are limits to how much they can track in terms of what's happening.
All right, thank you, and thanks for hopping in, Andy. It's great to have your expertise here with us as well. I'm gonna come back to these slides for a moment. And thank you, Madison, for that great demo as well. So as we approach our classes, we have to kind of figure out what we are comfortable with as individuals. So this is as you can see the poll here. What are you comfortable with?
Can folks see the results or no?
People are nodding or shaking their heads no. I can see that on the post.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll share them in a second.
Okay.
All right, last chance to vote. I'm ending it in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Now folks should be able to see that, yes?
And Nicole in the chat says, yeah, it really depends, and that's really where I fall too. And to some degree, it doesn't really matter what our own preference is. We can say no use, but we can't necessarily enforce that or even determine whether students are using it. This is an important aspect to remember. It's definitely covered in the in our toolkit for AI, that the detection tools are not useful and come up with lots of false positives. We can't just feed things into Turnitin in the same way that we've probably become accustomed to using for plagiarism detection, because it's the AI, as Andy kind of explained, can't tell if it's AI. It doesn't have that ability to detect. Right, lots of false positives, as Andy has noted here as well. So these are really important aspects to keep in mind as you're figuring out what your own comfort level is. But I'm not surprised to see the bulk of us falling sort of in that middle section, where we're not necessarily on either extreme end, but we're trying to figure it out. So a lot of this, of course, depends on your own teaching philosophy. And apologies to some of you who may have attended the writing conference in late August. Tom and I modeled this little exercise there as well, but we have a couple questions for you to think about how you've interacted with other sorts of technology in your classroom, not even just technology, but how do you, what does your teaching philosophy that pre-exists AI tools tell you about how you will sort of feel in the classroom about this? So we're going to go through this pretty quickly so we still have lots of time for discussion. Tom, actually, do you have that first question in front of you?
I do. All right.
All right, great. No worries.
When we did this with folks, we want you to respond in your head with your answer, yes or no, to this question immediately. We don't want you to think about it too hard because it's very telling to yourself, right? And we don't need to know how you responded. This is for you personally. So I'm going to ask you a question in just a second. It's either a yes or a no. Keep the response to yourself. We don't need it, but here we go. Ready? This is the question. Do you trust your students? Okay, yes or no? Do you trust your students? All right, Yannick, move to the next one there. And so I'm actually going to put Yannick on the spot here and let her respond to that. Like, does she trust her students? And what does that response tell her about the way she approaches her teaching, her assignments, and her assessments, and how that might be influencing her approach to AI tools? So Yannick, how'd you respond to that?
I would say yes. My real answer is sort of what Nicole put in the chat. It depends. But generally, I really strive to trust my students and to kind of meet them where they are and to acknowledge that they're adults and they are making adult decisions. And I try to construct my classes with that as a presumption. What this means for how I feel about AI, I would say, oops, I got too many little things here floating around my screen. I think that the way that sort of influences my feeling about using it in the classroom, and I'm a history professor, by the way. I'm teaching like 2 writing classes right now. I feel that I'm going to have to trust my students to make good judgment, just as they are going to analyze primary sources to do their research. Primary sources like a thing created in the past that we can analyze to make interpretations about what happened in the past. That is always going to be on them, and I don't think I'm going to trust that they're going to hold that standard as a historian and as a student. I also acknowledge that there will be ways that they can get preliminary ideas from using some of these tools if that's something that they want to pursue. And I think it's going to be on me to have these conversations in the classroom about like, why might this not be ethical to use someone else's analysis and so forth. Okay, next question 2. Think back to one of the last times you taught an in-person course and select a class session in your mind. So you're all thinking of a typical class that you have taught. How much time did you spend talking versus students talking during that class? Think about a percentage for this one.
So we asked this question a little bit to kind of get you thinking a little bit about how much active learning you might be applying in your class space where students are engaged in activities versus time where you're delivering information. And part of the reason for that, if Yannick slides to the next slide, is that AI tools bring with them, especially if you're thinking about using them in the classroom, a little bit more opportunity for active learning, especially some of the different activities you might be able to engage with students in the classroom. And that will be the topic of the webinar in a month from now. But I do want to ask Yannick to respond to those questions, like what percentage did she allocate in her typical classroom experience? And what does that speak to about how AI tools might fit into her approach?
Well, I generally am fortunate enough to teach smaller classes within the history department rather than large lectures. So I would say It's usually 60-65% students talking or interacting in some fashion. So I do think that my response and the way I run a classroom leans more towards the active learning. I'm really eager to figure out some in-class activities, and I've already been developing some for my research methods class in particular, that incorporate the use of these tools so that we can do a lot of critical thinking around them. I think for me, that's the approach that I'm taking is, if we use prompts probably together on the screen and then sort of dissect what the answers are. I mean, just almost like a little bit of what the exercise right here. But if we ask that, do that using prompts that like about a certain historian's argument that we're reading or so forth, and then kind of critically analyze what the response is, will help students process the article that they've read, but also help them think about, well, what are the limitations to using an AI tool for this purpose? Another question we've got here is, how often are you changing aspects of a course you teach? So think about that for yourself. I'll give my answer while we're chatting, or while you're thinking. I always aspire to change aspects of my course. Sometimes I'm a little later in actually getting around to those things, and inertia takes over. But I usually, I would say every semester at least, there's aspects of my courses that change. I really strive to be flexible in the midst of a course as well. If it's going off in a direction or something's not working, I'm not afraid to admit this isn't working, or this failed, and let's redirect and try something else instead. I really try to be flexible with I've started to put my syllabi in cloud documents that can be easily changed and updated throughout the semester.
So the last question there about tech integration, what's your approach to incorporating new technology into your course, is relevant here because AI is a form of technology. So if you are a little more reluctant at integrating technology, we can understand where you're a little bit more hesitant with how you want to approach AI tools. In the same way, if you're constantly making changes to your course, you may be a little more open to how you can incorporate or bring some of those AI tools into spaces in your course to engage with students. So all four of these questions that we've gone through touch on just some different aspects of your teaching philosophy that relate to AI tools, and they're good to think about, to kind of ground yourself as you move into getting into a place where you're going to talk to students about AI.
Thank you, Tom. And yeah, my last answer, really, I don't need to go into it a lot. I mean, I've taught, I'm our resident digital historian. I've taught in the digital humanities class, so I'm pretty accustomed to introducing new technologies. And that goes along with my last response as well. I also am very accustomed to tech fails, that technology doesn't always do what we want it to do. And I think we have to be really flexible with how we use it and how we approach it. All right. So we did distribute the AI toolkit earlier prior to the start of the semester. Hopefully most of you have seen it. If not, there is a QR code here that you can scan or use the tiny URL to access a few resources from this page, including the toolkit, as well as some other sample syllabi statements. We're not going to get too far in the weeds with syllabi statements because we've already all distributed our syllabi statements. But it is something to think about as you move forward. If you didn't add something to your syllabi this fall, this fall's experience might help you figure out what approach you want to take for your spring classes. This was a quote that I believe, Tom, you've found this one, and it really resonated with me. Almost every assignment at every level can be done at least in part by AI, and I almost viewed it as both ways, like we can develop assignment that will incorporate AI. Probably any assignment can be adapted for that. And also our students can be using these tools in some capacity to complete almost any assignment. One useful tip that I've heard for developing your assignment prompts to kind of see whether they are AI proof. I mean, that's sort of one aspiration is, well, it's all right. My prompts are so good. Students will never be able to like use AI to answer them, is to put your prompt into one of these generative chat tools and see what the response is. If you would give that response a decent score, then probably it's not AI proof. This is a tricky one because, you know, as we try to tweak our courses and think about uses, I mean, that was certainly my first response last spring, was like, oh, it's okay. My prompts are, I'm just gonna work on my prompts, make sure, just like I did when I first started teaching here at Westchester, I encountered a whole lot of plagiarism in my 100 level class I was teaching, and I was like, oh, it's my assignment that's the problem here. I need to really tweak the assignment and make it require students to reflect and draw on their own experiences in a different way. So it's important to think about, and that's a good way to test it out, see what you get. So all of this is to say, though, that I think it's really imperative, this is for my teaching philosophy approach, is that we have to talk to the students. We can't just pretend that doesn't exist. And we can't just ban it, because as we've already noted, a ban is sort of impossible when it's not something that we can actually detect and police. So I think a ban is sort of if we think of that spectrum, the no use, you can say no use, but that might not be something you can actually enforce. And so you might have to figure out where that middle gray area is, and that's more complicated, certainly for us as instructors. But we have to think about what our job is in preparing our students. What do we want them to know about AI within our own disciplines as well? And that's a heavy lift, absolutely. It's like learning a whole other field. But I think it is important. I haven't, as I said, I'm not an expert yet. I'm trying to figure out those things. How do my fields, as an oral historian, I think a lot of AI tools will be super useful. As someone who does a lot of original research, I think it's less so. But I need to figure out how to get my students to think about how it relates to our particular discipline of history. And please, I do want to keep this portion of our time together very flexible, like add additional things to the chat that you want to make sure that we cover, and the Q&A is here too, or hop in and share your approaches if it seems relevant as well. This is sort of the guideposts that I've developed for myself, because I want to really be transparent. This is something that I try to do whenever I create an assignment or talk to my students about why we're doing something. I've realized, of course, that if you explain your pedagogical decisions, they'll be more supportive of them. So explaining whatever your philosophy is about using AI and how it relates to the discipline and the content of the course, it's really important. Being transparent when you're developing an assignment sheet, just like you want to always explain what the purpose of the assignment is and what the task is, being really clear about deadlines. You want to be transparent about the use of AI, saying you might, if you choose to use it in the preliminary brainstorming phase, that's okay. I mean, you'll have to explain it with a little bit of nuance. I think, and this is where I'm really struggling, is I want to feel like I'm literate with the technology, and I'm not there yet. I'm learning a lot from all of you right here today. But I need to know what it is and how to use it and what it does well and what it doesn't do well in order to have these conversations about students. And some of that can be learning with them in the classroom. And I am trying to work on this assumption that 100% of our students are using AI. So recognize that they are using it now. And I have lots of friends who work out in the outside of academia, in the for-profit world, and they are already using AI for lots of tasks. That might be writing emails and memos, conducting preliminary research, creating an outline of something. They're using it. So if we know that that the future jobs that our students will have will require use of AI or encourage use, accept use of AI, then we need to figure out what our job as instructors of these students for whatever their future careers are. And if we just outright ban it and say, or pretend that it doesn't exist, that's not really preparing them for whatever their next steps are outside of the university. And that was a hard realization for me, is that, but it goes along with, I think my own teaching approach and my own philosophy is that I want to impart skills, not just the historical research skills, but lots of transferable skills that students will be able to use whatever they do in the rest of their lives. So I am thinking about that. Like, okay, if you're going to be using this in the future, then part of my job is training you in how to develop a good prompt. If you're doing one of these chat generative tools, how will you get information that is more useful, or what it's not good for, or what it is good for? So the limitations of AI are really important to know. The challenge there, of course, is that it's a shifting, rapidly moving landscape. What the limitations are today might be different in another couple of months, as we've already seen. So I want to make sure we're opening this up to hear your questions and also your advice and your experiences. I think this issue of citation and permission is a really important one for us to address. And I know that there's not an easy answer, but let's think about it. So Andy imparted to us earlier that you can't really cite it. Has anyone found a way to cite it? Is there like, if we would ask, if we think of that spectrum, one of those points on the spectrum was using with permission and citation. So how do you actually go about doing that?
So I'm going to take off my ID hat and put on my instructor hat for a second on that one. And my perspective right now is I want to know when students are using it. And so I'm asking them, if they are using it, to include some sort of note referencing what tool they used and to give me like a sentence or two on how they employed it using it. Mostly because I don't want them to feel like they have to hide it from me. And I'm using, APA citation primarily as a means of helping to teach that as well, but with the understanding that to the comment that Laura shared with us in the Q&A, that permission and citation aren't necessarily separate. We can give permission to use with citation, but AI isn't citable because you cannot go to the direct source. So what does it even mean to cite AI? To recognize that it's not quite the same. But that's kind of where my perspective is coming from, and that I want to see them using it, and I want to know they're using it, and I want them to acknowledge that use in some capacity. And so I'm using structures that already exist to make that happen.
Thanks, Tom. That's super helpful. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I guess I would make the somewhat fine distinction between citation and acknowledgement, right? That what we're talking about, what I think we absolutely should have students do, and what Tom is saying he's having students do, is acknowledge using AI, right? Which is a little bit different than citing, right? If I co-author with someone, I acknowledge their work. If I have an editor, I acknowledge their work, right? But I don't cite them in the same way, right? The purpose of citation is to trace, like, it's like to have chain of custody on our facts, right? So that then someone can go back and double check us, which AI's, the way that something like ChatGPT is set up, at least, that's impossible. It doesn't know what its sources were. The Bing tool is a little bit better insofar as, like, if it's giving you a source where it got a fact from, like, you can go back and check that. But then that's sort of like citing Wikipedia, like, just cite the underlying source, like, just go to the underlying source and cite that, like, why bother? And you're probably going to have to soon, because if Bing keeps giving people paraphrases that you don't have to click through to your site for, like that's going to cause weird advertising stuff, and bad things are going to happen. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I think like, if we want to use a citation style to do that acknowledgement, why not? That's an important skill to practice. But just I would point out to students, and I say this as someone who teaches our research writing course, and so I'm always trying to get them to think on the higher level of like, what is citation for, right? That it's not just a style that we drop in. It's not just put a thing in parentheses. It's acknowledge where your facts are from, right? That bloggers and journalists also cite sources. They don't use MLA format. They just say, according to so-and-so in Slate, and they drop a link in there. That's a citation because I can go and check where that came from, right? It's a citation practice, right? So acknowledgement is a little bit different.
That's really helpful. And I think, I've seen like citation styles for this, but they don't seem to make sense. But certainly, at least in that Bing tool in particular, like basically you can find the exact source. So it is almost like, and you were right to point out, like those were a lot of sources we wouldn't really want our students to be citing. They aren't scholarly. They aren't. So I don't think the AIs have access to JSTOR and EBSCO and to all the scholarly articles. That's sort of my assumption. But so I think, emphasize, and that's the way that we can sort of tweak our prompts, is to make sure, well, you have to use peer-reviewed scholarly articles and as your sources for this. Maybe upping some of those requirements for other kinds of citation will also help mitigate how we want our students to acknowledge and cite an AI use. Do we have other specific questions? I'm turning to you, Tom and Madison, as well. I haven't been able to follow everything in the chat. So you have to feed them the scholarly article, meaning you need to give them the text, or you need to okay, great.
Yeah, it's something like ChatGPT is only going to be able to see what you actually paste into the chat window. There are tools that do have some outside internet access. I think Elicit might be one of them, where you can give it a link, right? And then it can go and grab the outside document and parse it.
Great. So thinking about how those aspects might be incorporated into your assignments. At this point, which AI tool is the best to use? And I think we're going to definitely get an it depends sort of answer here. I think someone had earlier made the comment that ChatGPT is drawing on things from what, 2 years ago? Is that right? So it wouldn't have the most up-to-date information necessarily.
I mean,
other thoughts or opinions about what pros and cons?
Are you trying to create a new font? Like that would be AI Firefly, which is through Adobe. But if you're trying to do like writing-based tasks, I mean, ChatGPT and Bing and Bard seem to be the three like big ones at the moment.
Wait, they're letting you generate fonts?
Yeah, you can generate a font in
Firefly, it's called?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm gonna show
Eric's
it
gonna be
next
so
month.
pissed.
Helpful question here. Do you expect the university will eventually put forth a general statement of policy regarding the use of AI by students? The conversations that I was a part of this summer regarding that was not yet, for sure. Mostly the landscape is changing so rapidly. Based on those discussions, it also there seemed to be a strong acknowledgement that it's not one size fits all. We can't enforce a ban because the tools to enforce a ban don't exist. So in that regard, we can't, I mean, there were universities that say, like last winter after ChatGPT first came out, there were universities that did like blanket bans. And then by mid-spring semester, they revoked those bans because they realized it didn't actually work. I don't know what a statement would be. I mean, we might, because if it's like a syllabus statement that we are required to put into our syllabi, again, it's not going to be a one size fits all model, where, because some classes are going to encourage or even require the use, and other classes would be much more in that middle area of acknowledgement, or perhaps an outright ban if someone really is bold enough to try to make that a policy, even if they can't enforce it. Anyone else have thoughts on that, on what the university's role is or might be? Nicole just raised that, and this is what I've done as well, like asking students, I ask students to write abstracts for articles all the time. That's a pretty common assignment that I give in my history classes. And yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, in some ways it's something that we already encountered, because a lot of the journal databases already provide you with an abstract. And so I've acknowledged that to them, like, yeah, you're going to see an abstract here, but yours needs to do these 4 bullet points, and including like your kind of key takeaway reflection at the end. So making sure that you're integrating things like that into a prompt that otherwise could be very easily answerable. But I think it is the thinking. We have to remember that the purpose of a lot of our writing assignments is the critical thinking that's involved. And so trying to capture that critical thinking piece in another aspect, even if they can come with a generated abstract or summary from AI, then what is the next step in like really being sure that you're also integrating that thinking process. And I think that is something to talk about with the students. I mean, again, coming back to the theme of this session today is talking with them like, yes, I know that you can just ask ChatGPT for a summary of this article. What are the limitations of that? What will we be missing if we just allow the chat to do the work for you? And that's a way to, again, bring it back to what are the learning outcomes that I'm really pushing in this course or with a specific assignment. And I don't know, in some ways it makes our student learning outcomes that we've been forced to articulate for all these years, like really relevant. Like, well, what is the actual learning that I want to see happen here? And I think that's a good way to reach back to that as well. Yeah, writing to learn, great comment there. Tom, I want to make sure everyone hears this out loud. You all have a instructional designer assigned to you. Reach out to that individual. Everyone in the office is really has a better sense than me about like how to use these tools. And they'll also be able to help you think through the disciplinary choices that you need to be making, both the disciplinary choices as well as the like, well, what are the kind of transferable career-oriented skills as well? And I'm lucky enough to have Tom as my ID, and so I get all kinds of great advice, without even having to meet with him regularly. I think I get it sort of by osmosis from him, but make sure you're reaching out to your ID with a lot of these questions and concerns you have.
As we're getting smaller here, does anybody have other questions they want to ask in the last 4 minutes?
Do know that, yeah, as Tom has already previewed, one of the upcoming sessions this fall will be much more about like developing assignments and learning activities, which will be a lot more practical than this kind of theoretical discussion of like, what do we do? How do we talk about this? So I'm eager to like participate in those sessions as well, to think about how to actually construct assignments. And we also would love to hear from you. If you have developed assignments, whether they have been a complete fail or something really positive or something that you're going to build upon, we'd like to hear from you as well. We want to be compiling a bank of useful strategies for how to use this stuff in our classrooms, and that will include assignment prompts and so forth. So bring them on, send them our way. That address that Tom put in the chat will work, or you can always email me directly at jsmucker. I guess in conclusion, unless no one else has a lot of other wisdom to share, is that let's keep having these conversations. We know that you're not alone. We're all kind of figuring this out, and it's daunting. All change is daunting, and this is a big one. But keep in mind that we've figured out how to integrate other things into our classrooms. Our classrooms look nothing like the classrooms that I experienced when I was in college, and they will continue to change. And that's just, we have to acknowledge that and also be open to the change. We know about all the demographic shifts in higher education, we've been told about all of the enrollment challenges, and this also relates to all of these same issues of retention. We have to up our game. I really appreciate that Andy said a lot of these things are more work. Active learning is always more work. Changing your assignments up to integrate an AI tool is going to be more work. Hopefully it's work that will pay off. Hopefully we can recalibrate what we do and remember those core learning outcomes that we want our students to develop, and think about how these tools can help in that regard.
Can we jump to the last slide at this point?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I forgot there was a last slide. Yes, I need to get the share back on, sorry.
This is a chat item for everyone who's still here. The like 14 or 13 of you that we appreciate for sticking it out. Yeah.
Oh, this one, sorry.
Yeah.
There we go.
Let us know briefly in the chat if there's anything you picked up today that was useful. Thanks, Brett. Yeah, Esther, you hit on a key point. There's definitely work involved here, and I don't think there's a way around it. At least I haven't found one yet. Carrie, I like that acknowledge versus citation. That was one for me today, definitely. Like, I think I was missing that acknowledging word, so I appreciate that too.
Well, keep coming back. We have a couple more of these scheduled, which you should have all received, I think today in your email, the newsletter from the TLC, which will have the information about signing up for future sessions as we keep talking about this stuff. I really appreciate you taking time out of your, what I know are very busy days, very busy schedules, to be here with us to have this conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.